Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today on the 2016 vintage for Barolo. My colleague, Giulia Novara, would like to say a couple of words as we start.
Welcome to all of you. I hope you're having a good time. So I'm Giulia from Consorzio Vini del Piemonte. It's the first time we meet, so many of you already know the story, but we are a consortium from Piemonte of more than 230 wineries. The project that you're involved into is a project that we are starting this year. It's called Top Cluster. It involves not only our associates, but also other wineries from Piedmont, the best wineries that our partner in different countries select for us according to the project. In this case, we are really fond of storytelling. We want to communicate wine in Piedmont, not only talking about wines and labels, but also talking about stories. So, Tom Island is our ambassador in the United States, helped us to find the best and the most interesting argument that we could discuss together with our producers. So today you have an important argument, an important topic. We are talking about Barolo 2016, and I think that all of you know that this is an excellent vintage. So we will see for sure in the next years, but already today is great vintage. So thank you very much to Tom, and thank you very much to all the producers that join us today and all of our American friends. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you, Giulia. Paola Rinaldi has joined us. Ciao, Paola. For some reason, it says Giulia Novara. And
yes.
So
I'm younger now.
Okay.
Beautiful.
Maybe because you clicked on my link, because I shared my link with her. You can change
whatever.
your name.
People know who she is. Okay. All right. So, everyone, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. This is our fourth webinar in our series of webinars about Piemonte. And the previous ones have dealt with particular grapes, and whether it be Dolcetto or Nebbiolo, Ribera, or white wines from Piemonte. Today is a very specific topic. We're going to be talking about the 2016 vintage in Barolo, and we have 6 producers today. I think all of us would agree, myself and the producers and all of you tuning in as well, that if you've had a few of these wines, that this is a terrific vintage. And I think it's one of the best vintages of the last 2 decades, but you didn't tune in to hear me talk about these things. You tuned in to hear these producers. So let me introduce them one by one. First, we have Veronica Palladino from the Palladino Winery in Serralunga. Ciao, Veronica.
Hi, everybody.
And we have a nice connection. Veronica told me yesterday that you were expecting snow, and you got it quite a bit, didn't you?
Yeah. So we were a little bit afraid about the connection, but luckily everything is okay now.
Okay, yes, everything's worked out great. So, and is it normal on the 1st of December and 2nd of December to get snow, or?
Yes, in the last few years, no, but in the past, yeah. So okay. The snow is important, so okay. It's okay.
All right. We have Sergio Abrigo from the Giovanni Abrigo Winery in Diano d'Alba. Ciao, Sergio.
Hello, everybody.
We have Paola Rinaldi from the Francesco Rinaldi Winery in Barolo. Ciao, Paola.
Ciao, grazie.
Even though it says Giulia Novara there, I'm sorry about that, but that happens. We all know who you are. Federica Boffa is from Pio Cesare. She is the daughter of Pio Boffa. Ciao, Federica. How are you today? Gabriele Oderda from Terry del Barolo. We're speaking about his particular line of wines called, help me out here for a second. I'm looking at the Arnaldo Rivera. I always have problems saying that. So, and we have Matteo Molino from the Mauro Molino Winery from La Mora.
Hi, everybody.
Matteo, ciao. Okay, I'm going to start off with Veronica because this is the first webinar you've been part of. Everybody's taking part in 2 webinars, so you'll be with us today and also next week when we talk about Serralunga and La Mora. But tell us about 2016. Everything I read, everything I talk to, when I talk to producers, they tell me this was a very long growing season. Tell me about the weather that year in 2016.
2016 was a wonderful vintage, of course, everybody knows. So start with the winter with a lot of snow, and this helps, of course. The water is always very important, and the snow in particular in our area where we have a very calcareous and clay soil, so it's important to have the snow in the way that is able to create a reserve of water down on the soil. And so then we have the weather that was very balanced. We don't have, we have the right season. That is very important, and in the last few years it's difficult to find. And the great things is that we obtain these very high qualities, compare also to a big quantity. And so this is also something really very important. And we find a great balance on the wines. We have a level of alcohol that is quite high, but is also very well involved in the wine. And so we don't feel too much. Regarding us, for example, we have all our Barolos 2016 are 15% alcohol.
Okay.
But you don't feel this in the wine, so that is really very important, but give body and structure. A wonderful vintage, so a wonderful spring, and then a warm summer with the right rain in the right moment. And so I think that this all helped to create a really great vintage. I think one of the best of the last 30 years. Great,
that's a very impressive statement. Gabriele, you source wine, you source fruit from every one of the communes, and you have a very special wine called Undici Comuni, which I have a bottle of here, which is probably the most unique Barolo. Go ahead and say something and get your picture up there. Go ahead, okay?
Yeah.
One of the most unique Barolos produced because you've got fruit from all 11 communes, which is, I don't know if there's anybody else that does that, but I'm going to put up a map here of where some of the fruit comes from. And you can tell me a little bit about the, first, I'm going to put up a map, just a Barolo, so everybody knows where we're at. Okay, and you can see the different communes there. Now I'm going to put up.
Very important, we have put the river also in blue.
Okay.
Because that's a main, main factor.
Mm-hmm. Let me put up this other map that you send me.
Just a second, sorry.
Okay.
I'm in someone else's office now, so
okay.
Telephone might ring a little bit.
That's okay.
Okay,
so
this is the map
you sent me. Tell us
of
about the vineyards you source fruit from in the different communes. Tell us about was there any particular difference in the weather in, let's say, Serralunga, from Monforte, from Barolo, from any other place? Sometimes you hear about hail, for example, and maybe it affects one commune and not the next. So tell us a little bit about the growing season.
Absolutely. I would start from the wine that you mentioned. Barolo Undici Comuni is it's a think tank of vineyards rather than a wine itself. It represents an effort and a uniqueness. So we have tried to build a classic blend, so to bring on the tradition of Barolo with a wine that is a little revolution in Barolo, humbly speaking. Actually, the winery Terra del Barolo was named after the whole region. So what we are trying to do is just deliver the message of a winery that is kind of unique. When it's true that classic Barolo, the blended Barolo, it's the DNA of our region, with Undici Comuni we have tried to raise the bar a little bit and try to see if us in the winery we're able to keep alive this message, and in an era of much attention on crew in Barolo, try to see if we could still be able to appreciate and maybe rediscover the blended Barolo. So this is the first thing that I would like to say to introduce the experience of Undici Comuni.
Okay, let me step there for a second, Gabriele. Sorry, let me just switch over to Sergio, and then we'll check back with you in just a few minutes. Sorry, Sergio, you make a wine. Your Barolo is from the Rivera crew, in Novello. There's a bottle here, and I'll put up a picture of the vineyard. But how long have you been sourcing fruit from Rivera? Tell us a little bit about this vineyard. But first, tell us about that particular year, 2016, and the weather and the growing season. What was it like?
Well, I completely agree with the description of 2016 with Veronica. And I can add that most of the balance that we find in 2016 actually comes from the late and the end of the season of 2015 with good climate and a really big quantity of water in the soil that was able to carry on all the way through the 2016 vintage, helping the vines to develop in a really balanced way that we haven't seen for years. We always see different color in vineyards, but in 16, it was so balanced, even the color, so the ripeness, and so that's why all this balance and good acidity in the 2016 Barolos.
Okay, I'm going to put up a picture of you. You're part of Rivera here, and tell us a little bit about this vineyard. Okay.
Exactly. This is the picture of the part of Rivera facing east. So this is the extension of the crude terlo of Barolo. So
and we're in the commune of Novello, correct?
What, sorry?
We're in the commune of Novello, which is in the...
Yeah, it's a part of Rivera in over Novello. There's also 4 hectares of Rivera in Barolo, actually.
Okay.
But the most part of Rivera, it's under Novello. So as you can see, the vineyard is quite big. All the Rivera in total is 130 hectares. And we have 2 hectares since 2013. So we are quite young in Barolo making. We are making this Barolo from 2013 vintage.
Okay.
So that was a new project made from my family, looking at the passion of me and my brother. And so our desire, living in Diano d'Alba, to make a Barolo started in 2013 with these vineyards. So we only own these 2 hectares, and we only make 1 label of Barolo. And so that's why we use all the vineyards to make that bottle. So we make 2 different harvests because the vineyards, it's like an elongated vineyards located at 420 meters above the sea level. So it's like a long list of vineyards, and we split in 2 main parcels with 2 different harvests in 2 different days, because they get ripeness in 2 different periods.
Okay.
So there are, and then we make separately in the cellar the fermentation, and 1 parcel goes under submerged cap, which is a technique to extend
Sergio, let me stop you for a second. We'll go back later on and talk about the specifics of the wine. I'm trying to get just a general portrait of Barolo in 2016. So we'll come back to you. Let me go to Federica, who's been very patient waiting there. So Federica, I know that we're going to talk about your classic Barolo today. I know you also make, your father also makes the Mosconi from Monforte and of course the famous Ornato from Serralunga. So you go ahead and tell me about the different vineyards. I'm going to put up different pictures here that you sent me of the vineyards you source your fruit from, but how many different communes do you source Nebbiolo from for your classic Barolo?
Our family has been able to identify and acquire properties and vineyards more or less in the same surroundings since day one. And the selection of the vineyards and the selection of the different terroirs was not a random choice, but it was made according to the style of wine we always wanted to produce since 1881. So it was a choice made at the beginning of the 19th century by our great-grandfather, the person over there. Okay. And it is a choice that we strictly follow after 140 years of history. Nowadays, we proudly own more than 75 hectares of vineyards in 5 different villages of the Barolo area. They are located mostly in Serralunga. We have a
here's a
preference.
picture of Ornato here from Serralunga.
That's a picture of Ornato. We have a preference in the Barolo area for the village of Serralunga, which for us is producing one of the best expression of Barolo.
Here's a picture of Bricolina, also from Serralunga.
Yes, correct. And then we have acquired 10 hectares in a vineyard called Mosconi in the village of Monforte, which is located in the part of Monforte really close to Serralunga. So the two vineyards, Ornato and Mosconi, are really close to each other. They almost look at one another. However, they are producing very different wines.
Here's Mosconi. There's a picture of Mosconi.
It's a very good picture of Mosconi because it is showing us the different exposure of this vineyard. On the left side, we have some Barbera planted over there, very old vines of Barbera, dating back to the 40s and the 70s. Then we have the Nebbiolo for Barolo, of course, on the under the house, and then on the other side of the hill, the portion that we cannot see right now, facing north, is planted with Chardonnay. Then the rest is located in the village of Grinzane Cavour, then in the village of La Morra, and then a small portion in Ravera as well, in the village of Novello.
There's Novello.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about the difference in the style of well, I mean, you don't make single vineyards from all of these wines, but from all of these vineyards, excuse me. But you have Ornato from Serralunga, you have the Mosconi from Monforte. The classic combines fruit from all of these different communes. What can we say about the style of fruit from Serralunga versus La Morra or Grinzane Cavour or Novello or Serralunga?
Well, the point is that despite the fact that a very small amount of hectares are part of the appellation, there is a lot of diversity of the appellation called Barolo. There is a lot of diversity and difference within the different properties and within the different terroir, within the different villages. The idea is that we cannot embrace all these characteristics if we just focus on a single vineyard Barolo. The reason why we are following the traditional way of producing Barolo, which is not a matter of aging the wine in barrels or in small barrels or in big barrels, but is a fact of having the same grape, Nebbiolo 100%, coming from different communes and coming from different villages. We decided to focus on Serralunga at first because it's showing the great masculinity of Barolo, the great structure, the great potential, the great bones. But we also needed a little bit of Monforte as well to get the concentration, to get the color. We needed also Grinzane Cavour to get the elegance, La Morra to get the bouquet, and Novello to get the depth and the finesse.
Okay.
In this way, we can really show all the different shades of Nebbiolo. And all the different aspects of the Barolo region and our great terroir.
Okay, we'll come back to you and we'll talk to you about the work you do in the cellar with this different fruit. Let me talk with Matteo. Matteo, the Mauro Molino winery, very famous actually in Annunziata, which is a small district of La Morra. So tell us about the weather that year. Tell us about La Morra, what made 2016 so special.
So, like everybody told, 16 is a special vintage in general because really the balance, the elegance, and the deepness of this vintage we really think is absolutely incredible. About La Morra is a very big commune. You have to imagine that more than 30% of the Barolo is the commune of La Morra. Mauro Molino is my father, started to make wine in 1982 in the commune of La Morra. So we really, really believe in the La Morra style. La Morra style means elegance, great purity, and a very good elegance that are really the characteristic that we are trying to get to our wine. And of course, 16 gets a very good deepness and a very good character in the wine of all the Barolo and also in the La Morra area.
Okay.
So we own a few single vineyards in La Morra, and all these single vineyards have a very different characteristic, because La Morra altitude moved from 220 meters to 500 meters. So it's a a lot of difference between the different vineyards. Yeah, today we have the Conca 2016.
I will go ahead and put up a picture of that vineyard. When
represent our flagship. I mean,
what dates for the harvest? In 2016, what dates for the harvest?
14th of October in Conca. Conca is always the first vineyard we pick, because it's a little bit lower and it's very protective. It's a natural amphitheater, so it's always a little bit warmer. So we start on 14th of October with Conca. As you can see, is a bowl, it's like a natural shell, just down to the church and the monastery of Annunziata. And this form really characterizes the wine, because they are kind of wine that has the elegance and the pleasant of La Morra terroir, but at the same time, you can find, especially in this vineyard, a great deepness and a great concentration. So it's a kind of vineyard that always make wine that you can age for quite a long time. And the soil is very, very rich in limestone, and it's very calcareous. You have to imagine, when we did the analysis 2 years ago of the soil, Bricco Luciani, that is 200 meters, really 3 minutes walk, has 7% less, 7% more of sandy than Conca. So Conca is less sandy and more calcareous. So more richness, more deepness, more complexity also.
And Conca is really one of the very smallest.
Yeah, it's around 2 hectares, and we own the central part, is 0 4 hectares. For us, it's a really important vineyard, because my grandfather bought the farm in 1853, and mainly for Conca, because Conca was quite renewed single vineyard in the area of Annunziata. And my father started to make wine in 1882 with Barolo Conca. So always the same production is 3,068 bottles every year since 82. And for us, it represents a really something extremely important for us.
Okay. Great. We'll come back to you as we do with everyone. We'll talk about the specific of that wine. Let's talk with Paola. And we're going to talk about, you have 2 single vineyard Barolo, soon to be 3, but the 2 we're going to talk about today are Canubi and Brunate. So you're in La Morra and Barolo.
And Brunate.
You go.
Yes, of course, these are so historical vineyards. I think everybody knows where they are. So we can start, if you want, with Canubi. Canubi, you know, is in the town of Barolo, and it's one of the oldest areas for the Barolo production. In our case, my great-grandfather bought this vineyard from a farmer of the Marchesi Spalletti that was living in our farmhouse in Barolo on the Canubi Hill. The family name of this man was Boschis, and this is why the first part of the hill is Canubi Boschis. So in the Canubi Boschis, we have nearly 2 hectares, and then we add half an hectare in the middle of the hill. Canubi Boschis is, yes, here. It's an old, so we have old vines. A part of them are planted in 1970 and another part in 1990. And we replanted the middle of the hill only 5 years ago, and this is why we are producing some Langhe Nebbiolo of the middle part of the hill, even if, of course, in the future we are going to blend the grapes coming from all the Canubi area, of course. So the position of the thing.
Let me ask you a question. I'm sure a lot of people who are watching today want to know this, but there's been so much controversy and so much discussion about Canubi. And you mentioned that this part of Canubi is called Canubi Boschis.
Yes.
There's other parts that, you know, there was a court decision a few years ago that added on certain things. Now, I don't want to get into controversy here, you know, worry about that. But I mean, can we say that your holdings, this is kind of the historical part of Canubi?
Yes, you know, there was a big discussion regarding the Canubi Hill on the different parcels. So I asked my uncle, that is 96 years old, and he works in the winery since a lot of time. So he says, we said, so on our old labels, as you know, we wrote Canu Bio. So this was the old name we found of the first labels of our wine cellar. And we started in 1870. Of course, so with Barolo 2010, we had to change the name in Canubi because this was the name on the map.
Okay.
Yes, I think so. We have a part in Boskis and a part in the middle of the hill. On the label, I write Canubi now because I think it's nonsense to produce two different labels on the same hill. And the distance between Boskis and the middle of the hill is only 20-30 meters. So now the decision was that you can write Canubi, or if you prefer, you can write Canubi Boskis, Canubi San Lorenzo, Canubi Moscatelli, Canubi Valletta, and so on. In our case, we write Canubi because usually we blend the grapes from the middle of the hill and the beginning of the hill, so it's close one to the other.
Okay, and we always read about Canubi being sort of a very distinctive vineyard because the major soil types, you have Tortonian, you have the Cerevania, yes. It's a blend of those two soil types. Can you talk about that?
Of course, you know, the Helvetian soil is very compact with gray, brown marl. And the wines are more typical from Serralunga, Monforte, Castiglione Falletto. They are more alcoholic, maybe more austere. If you go to the Tortonian soil, we have more elegant wines. We have less compact soils with blue marl. And the wines are maybe a little more elegant, a little more easier to drink. In Canubi, so these two different areas that come together, and this is why probably in Canubi we add the elements of the Tortonian and of the Helvetian soil.
Okay.
This is why we think this is a wine that is able to age for a very long time. It's austere, at the same time it's also an elegant wine. Has a good structure, so we mean so it's a Barolo with a lot of elements. So it's difficult to say if there is a better one or not, but it's a very complex wine.
Yes, it is. I will put up a picture of now your holdings in Brunate. So tell us about the difference between Canubi and Brunate in terms of the vineyards, in terms of soil, elevation. Does one get harvested earlier than another?
Yes, usually so. We start with Brunate, you know, our wine cellar is in Canubi, and of course we produce all the wines in our farmhouse in Canubi. So we start with Brunate because Brunate is a little more far from our wine cellar. And so the old way of working was that you have to start with the vineyards that are not so close to the cellar. So if you will have rain or something like that, you have time enough to work at home. But the difference is only in 2 or 3 days. So we start with Brunate, and then we go usually to Roche della Nunziata, to Sarmassa, to Vignane, and the last vineyard we pick up is Canubi.
Okay.
About the position to the sun, we have to say that it's the same. So both of them look southeast to the sun. What we have to say about Brunate is that so the position of Brunate is a little different because it's more open. And so maybe also in the past, the storms coming from Brunate were considered more dangerous. you know, in Brunate there is a small chapel that belongs to Ceretto. And the name of this chapel was the Bad Weather Chapel.
Okay, all right.
Because an alarm bell was rung in case of rain, of storms, and so people had the time enough to go away, to go return home from the vineyards. And also the soil erosion in Brunate is a problem sometimes when we have a lot of water.
Okay, let me stop there and we'll go back to Gabriele and talk about the Undici Comune. Paola, we'll come back to you and we'll talk about the work you do in the cellar with these two wines. So Gabriele, let's talk about first, we have two wines from you today, the Undici Comune and then one from Granzane Cavour, the Castello, which very few people make that. So tell us a little bit about the Undici Comune. We mentioned this is fruit from all 11 communes. So when did you first start making this?
Wine, you know, there is a little a funny thing about Undici Comuni. It did exist before we label it as a word of mouth in the winery. All my colleagues, they used to call the big blend made by the winery as Undici Comuni, and this thing was running in our mind as you know, just more than word of mouth, but Undici Comuni was really our DNA. The only winery in Barolo representing 300 small growers, grower owners. For generation, we are already at the second or third generation of growers here in the winery. So that was a kind of idea unique in Barolo. So the multitude of families not melting their own experience and losing a little bit of this heritage of tradition, but it was a boost, a big boost to the true story of Langa. So craft people, artisan, history of family, sacrifices, generation. And the beauty has always been that the grower owners of Terra del Barolo, they just keep doing the vintners. They don't make wine.
Okay.
They just cannot. I mean, they are associate growers. So as soon as they deliver the fruit, then the winery takes over the business. And
as far as,
so
let me stop you for a second. As far as these 11 different communes, that's got to be a very complicated process in terms of sourcing all this fruit, picking. How long is the harvest? And if you look at all 11, what's the time frame in terms of harvest?
In 2016, it has ranged 15 days. You know, from the first parcel picked until the last one. But and I'm talking about the 5th of October until the 18th, 19th of October. So when we do the Undici Comuni, you know, we have a base wines that are vinified per commune. So it is true that we are in 10 different plots from 2013 vintage until 2017, and then we will raise up to 21 different plots from 8 different villages in 2018. So all these plots are then assessed, and when there is the right picking time, we bring into the winery. Then the last big blend will be done by communes. So we don't have 10 different micro fermenter for each and every plot, but we do it per commune.
Okay, and the
after 26 months.
For the production in the cellar, how do you age the wine?
We age the wine very simple way, traditional, large cask, 25, 30, 50 hectoliters for 26 months. And then we assess the wine, we do the final cuvée, and we age the cuvée for 6 months in concrete tanks before the bottling.
Okay. Let's talk also about the single vineyard wine we're talking about today is the Castello from Grinzane Cavour. I'll put a photo up and tell us about this vineyard, because you're one of the very few producers that make a Castello Barolo.
Mhm.
There we are.
Yes, sometimes when we talk about fine wines, great wines, we very often, or appellation, we very often talk about history of an area that goes far beyond winemaking, but it's also story of the people, culture, maybe gastronomy, landscape, so many things. And in particular, Barolo is strictly related with this concept, as Barolo was not far away from Turin. That was the capital of the first capital of Italy, but even before, the capital of Regno di Sardegna. So when we talk about Barolo as one of the main region for fine wine in Italy, we should consider the noble origin of the land. Although then the land is a countryside area that was not developed until the early 80s. But the history of fine wine in this area was born thanks to some key figures that put a lot of effort in the promotion of this wine more than 200 years ago. One of these people, one of the main people, was Camillo Benso di Cavour. Maybe you can show the picture. Camillo Benso di Cavour was a stubborn personality, quite independent in his own thought. He was one of the forerunner of the concept of Italy as a unified country. And he was also a gourmet. He frequently traveled the world, spending nice evenings and lunches in top restaurants in London, in Paris, and so on. And he was used to open great bottles of wine like Bordeaux or Champagne. So when he moved to Grinzane to start dealing a little bit with politics of the time, he was sent by his father because his father didn't trust him to become a politician too young. So he started to do some workout in Grinzane, and he lived in the castle. The castle was property of relatives of Cavour family. So when he arrived in Grinzane, he was just impressed by the amazing landscape and potential of this area. Although he just didn't develop the winemaking, he planted beetroots, he did many farm studies beyond the wine. But the wine for sure was one of the main ones. And together with him started to work Paolo Francesco Staglieno, that was a former general of the army, that was an agronomist. And together with him also Monsieur Oudard, that was owner of a merchant company in Genova, and was of a French origin. So it was a all-star team living in the same period, and Castello di Grinzane was one of the main vineyards where Cavour was sourcing the grapes. The property of this cru, that is a 7.1 hectare going southwest to southeast, it's a historic cru. It's not planted on the north. So when people walk up to the hill of the castle, they will see that it's just planted southwest to southeast. This is a very nice picture of Barolo traditional culture of the cru. So this vineyard is publicly owned, and we took over managing the vineyard in 1973 as a winery, in cooperation with the School of Enology and Agriculture of Alba and Grinzane.
Okay,
So,
Gabriele,
unfortunately,
let me interrupt you just for a second. I have to make sure we have time for everyone else. So, a great story, but I want to know more about the wine itself. Do you make it the same way as the Undici Comune in large oak, grande botte?
There are about 5,000 bottles. We isolated a very small plot on the southwest, Sori della Sera. As Grinzane is not a very high crew. It's about 250, 260 meters above sea level. You can translate in feet. It's a very hot valley. It's close to Talloria River. And what we do is a parcellaire, so a selection of the plot. The crew is large, but we have just a half of a hectare that we vinify alone in a few casks and tonneaux. And after that, it spends 32 months in wood and then bottle, one year in the bottle.
Okay, perfect. Last question for you. This line of wines, Arnaldo Rivera, you also have single vineyard Barolo from very famous vineyards such as Ravera in Novello and Vigna Rionda in Serralunga. I understand you will also add Roque della Nunziata very soon. Are these wines available in the United States? I think this is something a lot of people are interested in.
They are. People can make a head up to Monsieur Touton in New York.
Okay, thank you. Let me go to Sergio now. Sergio Abrigo, tell us about Rivera again. I tried the wine today. One of the things I've noticed with just about every producer's Rivera is the elegance and the supple tannins of this wine. And it certainly came through in your 2016. How much of that is the vineyard and how much of that is the winemaking?
Well, I think it's more about vineyards, even because not in the 16, it showed really the purity of the elegance, but even in other vintages like 17, for example, what was way more hot, it's still elegant, and the tannins are really fine and integrated with the wines. I think the winemaking, it doesn't matter that much. I think it's around 30%. Of course, you have to make a great vinification, but at the end, the soil is the most important thing. And the elevation is another factor that pays a lot, because we are at 420 meters, and in a vintage with a long growing season like the 2016, we had the opportunity to carry on the ripening for a very long time, getting full ripeness of the tannins in a perfect way.
And you aged this wine in both Grandi Botte as well as Tonneau, the mid-size, correct?
Well, we don't have that much barrels at home. We have 10 hectoliters barrel that we mostly use for make our Barolo, even because we do a lot of different fermentation of the same parcel. So we like to make vinification in little tanks, and then we take them separately, even in the aging. We just blend them at the end of the aging, generally. Even because we start from a different harvest made in 2 or 3 different days. And so we take them separately in 10 hectoliters barrel generally. Then we have also some 500 liters and few barriques.
Okay, for this 2016 question, and I'll ask everyone, but let me start with you. Whether you're a beginner with Barolo or whether you've been drinking Barolo for 20, 30, 40 years, you always want to know about the vintage and how long will these wines age. So tell us about 2016. In your estimation, when will be the peak time to drink this wine?
We all have a great expectation from the aging worthy of 2016, because the acidity, the color is bright, and the structure is really well done. And the acidity has got low pH and good total acidity. And even the tannins are, there are so much tannins in terms of quantity, in terms of polyphenols, that we all believe that it will age perfectly like other great vintages of Barolo. So we can say 20, but we can even say for more than 30 years of work.
Okay. Great. Yeah, but well, you said it has a lot of tannin, and yet I find the tannins in these wines, the 16s, to be so supple and so elegant. And
yeah, because they are
very
right.
different from what it was 20 years ago, 30 years ago.
Well, you know, it will be the same, a little bit more aged. So when the tannin are already soft since the beginning, you just run them a little bit, but the wine won't change that much.
Okay, thank you. Federica, what do you think about 2016? Tell us about what do you think the aging potential is in this classic Barolo of yours?
I would say that speaking about the fact that Barolo is renowned all over the world to be a wine that can age for 25, 30 years and more, I have to say, I have to explain to all the people that are listening to us that we are not drinking the same kind of Barolo that my father and my grandfather and my great-grandfather was drinking many years ago. Today, the style of our Barolo has changed a little bit, not because we have changed the way of producing it in a way, but because the climate has changed a lot.
Okay.
Climate has been warmer. Today we are harvesting almost 1 month before what we were doing many years ago. And this is not, we always listen to the fact that climate change and global warming is something negative. Well, it is, but in some way in our region it's something positive because it helped our tannins to be less green, to be less stringent, to be more round, to have more elegance, to be not too much acidic. And this way, I think that our Barolos are wines that can be enjoyed despite their use, despite the fact that they are young. However, they will of course benefit from a few years in the bottle, but don't wait too many years before opening a good bottle of Barolo. Or at least you can keep one bottle for 20 years and keep and drink the same vintage right now, and then compare the style in 20 years, in 25 years.
Oh, yeah, so you're trying to get people to buy a case, right?
No.
Okay.
It's just trying to explain.
I understand.
The concept of,
and just very briefly, the aging regime with the classic Barolo, is it the mid-size, botti, barrique, combination?
Our way of aging Barolo is traditional in the sense that we are using mainly big cask, Slavonian and French oak of from 50 to 60 hectoliters, and a small amount of barriques, so small barrels as well. The aging process is the first 9-10 months are spent in barrique, and then the rest is taken inside of big cask. And something that is very important to say for our philosophy is that our Barolo is not a blend of wine, but it is a blend of grapes since the beginning. So when we pick the grapes, when we receive the grapes from 5 different villages, I have already said before, and when we receive the grapes in our cellar, we fill the stainless steel tanks with the same percentage of the vineyard every year, so following the family's recipe. So the blend is done before the fermentation. So all the different vineyards aged all together.
Great, thank you. Veronica, back to you. Thank you for being so patient. We're looking at 2 of your wines today. And we'll look at a couple of your wines next week also, but we have the Comune di Serralunga.
Yep.
And we also have a single vineyard, the Parafada from Serralunga. So I've always said that people looking for value in Barolo, they should look at these commune wines. And there are many producers in Serralunga that produce a Barolo del Comune di Serralunga. Tell us about how many different growers you work with. Tell us about how that wine is made.
Yeah, so this is our classic Barolo. So it's a Barolo that represents the Barolo from Serralunga because the grape came from 5 different vineyards, all inside the village of Serralunga d'Alba, of course. 2 came from the north part of the village and are a part of the grape from Parafada that we will taste the wine after. and one from Gabutti, and then 3 vineyards from the south part of Serralunga that are San Bernardo, Sterra, and Ornato. So 5 different vineyards, 2 from the north and 3 from the south. Serralunga is always very interesting because there's big differences between the north and the south part, change a little bit the soil. So in the north, we have a small percentage of sand more comparing the south, and so we have more elegance and more fruitness, like, for example, we can find in the Parafada. In the south, this sand disappears, so we have just calcareous and clay soil, so more structure and more powerful. So this is the case, for example, of the San Bernardo or the Ornato. We have more minerality. Both our Barolo, both the classic del Comuni Serralunga d'Alba and Parafada, the vinification is the same in the way that we make long fermentation temperature control in stainless steel, second fermentation in concrete barrel, like we did in the past. And after we used to keep, especially the classic Serralunga, 9 months in concrete barrel, because in this way we had the tannins to be a little bit soft and round. And then is a little bit different the aging in the way that both are aged in big barrel, but for the Barolo Parafada we use big barrel in French oak that are more or less 10 years old. For the classic Serralunga we use big barrel in Slovenian oak that are more than 40 years old. Okay. So a little bit less wood in the classic Serralunga.
Right. I'm going to put up a picture of the Parafada then you can talk about that particular vineyard, particular wine.
Yeah. So the Parafada is located in the north part of the village of Serralunga d'Alba, and is a full south exposition. Is 260 meters more or less till it's more or less 370 meters. Is a very elegant vineyard. So the wine that usually came from the Parafada are very elegant, are very salty. So have this saltness at the end that is very beautiful. It's the most elegant of our wines in general, of our Barolos. More strong with structure, for example, the Ornato and the Reserva San Bernardo. Talking about what we're talking before regarding how many years age a Barolo, I'm agree with Federica. I think that the new generation love to drink young Barolo in general. Right, so right. We love the Barolo that are alive, and so maybe in our case we change a little bit our way of working, the way to obtain a little bit more drinkability. This don't mean that the wine will have a shorter life comparing the past, but the difference is that we can also enjoy today, and I think that it's very important to enjoy a Barolo also when it's young. So it's important to drink the wine.
Let me ask you, and then at the end we'll ask everyone else, but what is another vintage you can compare 2016 with as far as Barolo?
Wow.
Or can you? I mean, it's such a wonderful vintage.
Oh, wow. I don't know if I personally never taste a vintage like the 2016. Personally, I don't know exactly. I think I'm a big fan of 2001. Also, if we're different. So today we find the drinkability that were not in the wine from the past. So it's completely different. It's a big vintage. It's a great vintage like it should be. For me, the 2001 is the same structure, and it's a big vintage, but completely different. So it's difficult to find a vintage similar.
Okay, thank you. Paola, how would you compare 2016 with other vintages? What are the closest vintages, or is that an unfair comparison?
So, about the age of the wines, so my uncle said that also in the past, Barolo was sold or still young or aged for 7-8 years. So this means that also in the past, there was a different way of drinking Barolo, or still young or aged for a long time. Of course, he said also the prices were different because the young Barolo were cheaper than the more aged one. So of course now we, especially here in Italy, I think we enjoy to drink a little younger wines than you in USA. I think you enjoy more very old wines. it's a different way of drinking a wine. Of course, I think it's interesting to taste very, very old bottles for looking to the way they age and so on. But I think for enjoying a Barolo bottle with friends, if you have a bottle that is 10, 15 years old, I think you are drinking a very good Barolo.
Okay.
I enjoy, for example, Barolo 2008.
I think it's a great vintage. It's a very Piemontese vintage.
Yes, and so maybe, so of course, we have to wait some years more for look to our Barolo 2016 and the way the wine is going to age. But I think 2008 or 2010 maybe had a similar quality in the grapes.
Okay. Matteo, let me talk to you a little bit. You've been very patient waiting there. Tell us about how you make the conca. And I know,
yes.
Go ahead.
Conca is quite a small production, like I told before, because the production is only 3,000 bottles. And I mean, since the beginning, we age Conca for 20, 22 months in a small barrel. Since 2016, we introduced the troncoconic wood for the fermentation. So we do 2 weeks and a half of maceration and fermentation in wood. And after, we put the wine in small barrels, doing the malolactic in wood, and after age for another 22 months in a small barrel.
Let me stop you right there and ask, because you're one of the few, certainly with this group, you know, we have mostly traditional producers, especially with Paola Rinaldi and with Palladino and now the Arnaldo Rivera wines, very traditional large casks, yet you still use barriques. Can you explain why the decision was made to use barriques and why you continue with that?
So, first of all, we don't use only barrique. I mean, we use barrique for Conca, for La Serra.
Okay.
For example, Bricco Luciani is aged for 10 months in barrique and 10 months in big barrel. Our classic Barolo, that is the main quantity, the bigger quantity, is only in big barrel. What we can say is that we use only French wood. I mean, our wood are 100% French because we really like the elegance and the finesse. And we really think that is combined very well with our grapes. So I think that it's extremely important to get experience on our home vineyard and just doing the vinification, to combine the vinification with the grapes. But never forget that the most important thing is always the vineyard and always the grapes. That's 90% of the work. And after, I think the work of the winemaker is to exalt and maintain the quality of the grapes that you pick from the vineyard. So my father started at the beginning of the 80s to make wine, and he started mainly with a small barrel. We changed the quality of the wood. We use mainly very light or not toasted wood, and the percentage of new wood for Conca is 35%.
Okay.
For Luciani, for example, is another vineyard. We do 19 months in 20% new small barrel and another 15 months in 25 or 30 hectoliters French wood.
In a vintage such as 2016, which everyone describes as just classic and got a wonderful long growing season and a normal harvest of mid-October, do you make the wine any differently, or is it just less work, less trouble to make wine that year, in a year like that?
Yes, of course. It was easier in a great vintage like 16. I think we are very lucky to have vintage like 2016 because I personally recognize a great vintage when we pick the grapes, but not great as I think now is 16. I mean, we are living now a golden decade for Barolo because the climate change is a perfect time for Barolo, and the grapes are every year very, very beautiful, very nice. But what was inside of the grape in 16 was something magic. And I think that the evolution and the greatness of 16 was something that I personally recognized during the aging. And when we bottle the wine, when we taste again after the bottling, we really find something unique. And you asked it before if you can compare another vintage with 16, and I agree that it's very, very difficult, because it's not easy to find a vintage with the deepness, the complexity, the purity, the elegance, and the complexity at the same time of a Barolo. I mean, it's really spectacular vintage 16.
Right. And how long, what will be the peak drinking on this 2016 Conca?
It's very difficult to say. I really think that it's a kind of vintage that for all the Barolo has a really great potential. Conca makes always quite rich Barolo to be in La Morra, and the potential is always very, very interesting. But I can always say that it's a vintage that make a very enjoyable wine, a kind of wine 16 that few times when the restaurant were open, and I was to the restaurant, if I find a 16, I get a 16, because it's magic since the beginning, since it's, when it's young.
Well, this has been a great discussion. I wish we had another hour. I'm going to raise my glass of Barolo. This is specifically the Rivera from Abrigo. Lovely, lovely wine. But and I'll ask all of you as we wrap up here, from 1 to 10, how would you rate the 2016 vintage for Barolo?
10.
10?
Yeah.
10? Okay. I got one answer here from a panelist saying 10. Federica, what would you say? Oh, your microphone's off. I'm sorry.
In Italian, it means 10 plus.
10 plus, okay. Paola?
I hope 10, yes. Also
Okay.
in the next years, yes.
Okay. Gabriele? Gabriele,
we talk to US, so we would say 100 or 100.
Okay, well, that would be a typical American answer, or answer for the American market. Absolutely. So great. Thank you all again. Julia, did you want to say anything very quickly as we wrap up here? We're not hearing you, but your microphone is off.
Right.
Okay, go ahead.
Nothing. Thank you very much to all producer, and thank you for this opportunity to present the Barolo 2016. It's amazing now, and it will be amazing in the future. So great. Thank you.
Thank you. And to everybody out there watching, if you haven't purchased your 2016 Barolo yet, do not wait any longer, because many of the wines are already sold out, and the ones that are left will be gone very, very soon. I mean, some of the major magazines have not even reviewed them yet, but the ones that have been, just written spectacular things about these wines. So this is maybe not a once in a lifetime vintage, but once in every 2 decades. So it's definitely go out and buy these wines and enjoy. So again, salute. Be careful of the snow out there. And I think we see Veronica. We see you next week. The rest of you, I appreciate your participating in these webinars, and buon Natale.
Grazie.
Auguri. Natale, auguri.
Ciao a tutti, auguri.
Ciao, ciao.
Ciao a tutti, ciao.
Auguri.